John was a police officer in a small town. He had worked in the police department for over 10 years. Every day, he wore his uniform with pride. He believed that his job was very important. He told himself that he protected the people and kept the town safe. John was a man of habits. He woke up early, drank black coffee, and read the news on his small TV before leaving for work. He lived alone in a small house on the edge of town. His family had moved away years ago, and he rarely talked to them now. In his town, many people looked different from John. Some had darker skin, and some spoke with different accents. John did not understand many of these people. He often felt uncomfortable when he saw groups of them together, especially in places like the market or near the park. At work, John often judged people quickly. If someone looked different, he thought they might cause trouble. Sometimes, when he stopped people on the street, he treated them harshly. Some of his co-workers noticed this, but no one said much. The town was small, and people did not want to cause problems. One morning, John was driving his patrol car near the busy part of town. He saw a group of young men standing outside a store. They were laughing and talking loudly. John felt a little nervous. He decided to stop and ask questions. "Hey, what are you doing here?" John asked, stepping out of his car. One young man looked at John calmly and said, "We are just waiting for the bus, sir." John was not convinced. He watched them carefully and asked for their IDs. The young men showed their papers politely. John still felt unsure but let them go after a few minutes. As he drove away, John thought to himself, they might cause trouble later. I need to keep watching. John's feelings were hard for him to explain. He was not angry, but he felt a distance from people who were different from him. This distance grew over time. He believed that if he stayed careful, he could keep his town safe. That afternoon, John went back to the station. His boss called him into the office. "John," his boss said seriously, "I have heard some complaints about how you treat people on the street. We need to be fair and kind to everyone, no matter who they are." John looked down. He did not want to hear this. He believed he was doing his job well. "I am just trying to keep the town safe," John said quietly. His boss nodded. "I know. But we have to do this with respect and fairness. Remember, we serve all the people here." John left the office feeling confused. He wanted to be a good officer, but he did not know how to change his feelings. That evening, John sat alone at his kitchen table. He looked at the pictures on the wall, old photos of his family and friends. He wondered if they would be proud of him now. He felt a little lonely. Outside, the town was quiet. The street lights shone softly, and the wind moved the leaves gently. John knew something was missing in his life, but he did not know what it was. He just knew he wanted to keep the town safe no matter what. Miles lived in the same town where John worked. But Miles' life was very different from John's. Miles was a Navy SEAL. He had spent many years traveling around the world, working in difficult places. He was strong and brave, but he was also kind and thoughtful. After his last mission, Miles had decided to come back home. He wanted to be near his family and friends again. He hoped to live a quiet life for a while. But coming back was not easy. Miles noticed that things in the town were not the same as before. People did not always treat each other with respect. He saw how some police officers acted when they met people who looked different. It made Miles feel sad. Miles was a tall man with deep eyes that showed he had seen many things. He often walked through the town, greeting people with a smile. Many knew him as a hero, but he never talked much about his past. One afternoon, Miles stopped at the local coffee shop. He liked to sit by the window and watch the world go by. That day, he overheard a conversation between some officers at the next table. They were talking about a group of young men who were suspicious. Miles listened carefully. He felt a strong feeling inside. He wanted to help people understand each other better. At the same time, John was also at the coffee shop. He sat at the counter, drinking his usual black coffee. When John saw Miles, he felt a little uneasy. John had heard about Miles and his Navy SEAL work, but he didn't know him well. Miles noticed John looking at him. He gave a small nod and smiled politely. John did not smile back. He quickly finished his coffee and left. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. The streets of the town looked calm and peaceful, but under the surface, there were feelings of fear and misunderstanding. The next day, Miles went to the community center. He wanted to help the young people in town. He believed that if the youth had good leaders and good examples, the town could become stronger. At the center, Miles met many children and teenagers. He told them stories about teamwork, courage, and respect. He showed them how to work together, no matter what their skin color or background was. The young people listened carefully. Some smiled, some asked questions. Miles felt hopeful. Meanwhile, John was still struggling with his own thoughts. He kept seeing those young men from the market in his mind. He wondered if he had been too quick to judge them. But his old feelings were strong. One evening, John received a call. There was a small emergency near the park. Someone had reported a lost child. John rushed to the scene. When he arrived, he saw a group of people gathered. Among them was Miles. The child was safe, but scared. Miles was comforting the child and talking to the parents kindly. John watched from a distance. He saw how Miles spoke gently and how the people around him listened. It was very different from how John usually acted. John felt something change inside him. He realized that maybe there was a better way to help people. Later that night, John sat in his small house, thinking about the day. He thought about the child, the parents, and Miles. He asked himself, what kind of officer do I want to be? He did not have an answer yet, but he knew that things could not stay the same. The next morning, John woke up feeling uneasy. The image of Miles comforting the lost child stayed in his mind. For the first time in a long while, John wondered if he had been wrong in how he saw people. But old habits are not easy to change. At the police station, John sat at his desk, staring at a report he needed to finish. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his boss: attend the community meeting at the town hall tonight. Miles will be there. John sighed. He wasn't sure why he was being asked to come. He thought about skipping it but decided it might be better to face the situation. That evening, the town hall was full. People from all walks of life gathered, some curious, some excited, some worried. The mayor stood at the front, welcoming everyone. Tonight, the mayor said, we will talk about how we can make our town a safer, kinder place for all. We have a special guest, Miles, a Navy SEAL who has returned home and wants to help. The crowd clapped softly. Miles stepped forward. His calm voice filled the room. I have seen many parts of the world, Miles said, and I have learned that the strongest communities are those where people respect and trust each other. Fear and hate only build walls between us. but understanding and kindness can tear those walls down. John listened quietly. He looked around and saw faces of people who had been judged or misunderstood. He remembered his own actions and felt a weight on his heart. After Miles finished speaking, the mayor opened the floor for questions. Many people spoke about their fears and hopes. John's hand went up slowly. The room grew silent. "I want to say something," John began. His voice was soft but steady. "I have been a police officer for many years. I thought I was doing the right thing by keeping people safe. But I see now that sometimes I was too quick to judge. I want to learn how to be better. I want to help all the people in this town, no matter who they are." There was a gentle applause. John felt relief and a strange new feeling, hope. After the meeting, Miles walked over to John. "It takes courage to say what you said," Miles said kindly. "I am here to help, not to judge." John nodded. "Thank you. I want to understand more." Over the next few days, John and Miles began to talk more. Miles shared stories from his Navy SEAL training, where trust and teamwork were everything. He explained how people from many backgrounds work together as one team. John shared his worries and fears too. Miles listened without judgment. One afternoon, they decided to visit the market together, the place where John had once felt uneasy. As they walked, Miles greeted the shopkeepers warmly. People smiled back. John noticed that the market felt alive with energy and kindness, not fear. They stopped at a small fruit stand where a young woman was arranging apples. "Hello, Mrs. Davis," Miles said with a smile. John looked at the woman and said, "Hello." She smiled back. "Good to see you, officers." John felt a small smile form on his lips. He realized that this was the kind of town he wanted to protect, not with fear, but with respect. That evening, John called his sister. It had been years since they talked. He wanted to reconnect. Maybe, he thought, if he could change himself, he could also rebuild the family he had lost. The journey ahead was not easy. John knew that old feelings would not disappear overnight. But for the first time, he believed change was possible. Miles had shown him that strength was not just about power, it was about kindness and understanding. And in this small town, two very different men were beginning to build a bridge one step at a time. Days passed, and John kept thinking about the changes he wanted to make. He was trying to be more patient and listen carefully when he met people on the street. But old habits and thoughts were still inside his mind, making the process slow and hard. Meanwhile, Miles continued his work at the community center. Every day, more young people came to listen to him. He taught them how to respect one another and work together, no matter their differences. The center became a safe place where people laughed, learned, and shared stories. One afternoon, a big problem came to the town. There were rumors about trouble near the old warehouse district. Some people said that a group of young men were causing problems and making the area unsafe. John was called to investigate. He felt nervous. He remembered how he had judged people before, and he did not want to make the same mistakes. When John arrived at the warehouse district, he saw a group of teenagers hanging around. Some were playing music, others were talking quietly. John walked slowly toward them. His heart was pounding. "Hey," he said, "I'm Officer John. What are you doing here?" The young people looked up. One of them, a tall boy named Marcus, stepped forward. "We're just hanging out, sir. No trouble here." John looked at Marcus carefully. He could feel the fear and hope in the boy's eyes. John remembered how he used to see fear instead of people. Before John could say more, Miles appeared beside him. "Hello, everyone," Miles said with a friendly voice. "I know many of you from the community center. We are here to talk, not to fight." The teenagers relaxed a little. Marcus smiled. "Thanks, Mr. Miles. We're just waiting for some friends." John felt something inside him soften. He realized that these young people were not the problem, they were part of the solution. Suddenly, a man walked up. He was the owner of a nearby factory. "These kids are a problem," he said loudly. "They are scaring customers and hurting business. You need to get them out of here." John looked at the man, then at the teenagers. He could see the man's fear and anger, but also knew the teenagers were mostly peaceful. Miles put a hand on John's shoulder. "We need to listen and understand before we act," Miles said quietly. John took a deep breath and spoke to the factory owner. "Sir, I understand your concerns. But we want to find a way that works for everyone." John then turned to the teenagers. "I'm going to ask you to keep this area safe and respectful. Can you do that?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir. We just want to be heard and respected." John felt a new respect for the boy. "Okay. We'll work together." After that day, John and Miles started to visit the warehouse district regularly. They helped organize cleanup days, art projects, and sports games. Slowly, the area changed. It became a place where people felt safe and proud. John learned a lot from working with Miles and the young people. He realized that real safety comes not from fear, but from trust and respect. One evening, after a long day, John and Miles sat on a bench near the park. The sun was setting, painting the sky with warm colors. John looked at Miles and said, "Thank you for showing me a different way. I want to keep learning." Miles smiled. "We all have something to learn. The important thing is to keep trying." John felt hope growing inside him. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he was ready to walk it. And in that small town, something powerful was beginning to grow: understanding, respect, and a true sense of community. John was beginning to feel different. His days were no longer just about patrols and rules. They were about meeting people, listening to their stories, and trying to understand their lives. He wanted to be better not just as a police officer but as a person. One afternoon, as John was walking through the park, he saw a group of children playing. Among them was Marcus, the tall boy from the warehouse district. Marcus waved at John and ran over. "Hey, Officer John," Marcus said happily. "Do you want to play with us?" John smiled, surprised but happy. "Maybe later, Marcus. I'm on duty, but thank you." Marcus nodded and ran back to his friends. John watched them play and felt a warm feeling inside. This was the town he wanted to protect, a town where children could laugh without fear. That evening, John sat in his small house and thought about his life. His thoughts drifted back to his childhood, to his father. His father had been a strict man who believed in toughness and never showed much kindness. John had learned from him that being strong meant being hard and unbending. But John was beginning to understand that true strength was different. True strength was in kindness, patience, and respect. The next day, John received a surprise visit. His sister, Anna, stood at his doorstep. She had heard about the changes in John and wanted to see him. John was nervous but happy. They had not spoken for many years. Anna smiled warmly. "I'm glad to see you, John. They talked for hours, sharing stories and memories. John told her about Miles, the Navy SEAL, and the work at the community center. Anna listened carefully. "You're changing, John," she said softly. "I'm proud of you." John felt tears in his eyes. He realized that change was not just for the town but also for himself and his family. Meanwhile, Miles was also facing challenges. Some people in the town did not like the changes. They were afraid of losing control or seeing things they did not understand. One evening, Miles found a note on the door of the community center. It was a message telling him to stop his work. Miles felt worried but did not give up. He called John. "John, some people don't want us to help," Miles said. John answered firmly, "We can't stop now. The town needs us." Together, they decided to organize a town meeting to talk openly about the fears and hopes of the people. They invited everyone: officers, families, business owners, and young people. The night of the meeting was cold, but the hall was full. Some people were angry, some scared, but many were hopeful. Miles spoke first. "Change is hard. But we must face it together. We are stronger when we listen and respect each other." John added, "I have made mistakes. I have judged too quickly. But I am learning. And I want to help build a better town." A woman in the crowd stood up. "I was scared at first," she said, "but seeing how you work with the young people gives me hope." Another man said, "We all want safety, but we must remember it comes with respect." The meeting ended with applause and a feeling of unity. Afterwards, John and Miles walked outside. The stars were bright in the clear sky. John said, "I'm glad we did this." Miles smiled, "Me too. This is only the beginning." John knew that the journey was not over, but for the first time, he felt ready. Ready to face the past, change himself, and help his town grow. Spring arrived in the town, bringing new colors and fresh hope. Flowers bloomed in the gardens, and the air was filled with the sound of birds singing. The town felt lighter, as if it was waking up after a long winter. John and Miles were busy with their work. John's patrols now felt different. He talked to people with a smile and listened more than before. Miles continued leading activities at the community center, where young people painted murals and played sports. One morning, John received a call about a fire in an old building near the edge of town. The fire was small but dangerous because the building was near houses. John rushed to the scene. When he arrived, he saw neighbors gathered outside, worried and scared. The fire trucks had not come yet. John knew he had to act quickly. As John looked around, he saw Marcus and some other teenagers near the building. They were helping by moving things away from the fire and calling for help. John was surprised but proud. He shouted, "Marcus! Great job! Keep everyone safe." Marcus smiled, "We're doing our best, sir." Suddenly, the fire spread faster. The building's roof started to fall. John saw a woman inside. She was trapped. Without hesitation, John ran into the building. The smoke was thick, and the heat was strong. He called out, "Where are you?" A weak voice answered, "Here. Help me." John found the woman in a small room. She was coughing but alive. John lifted her gently and carried her outside. The crowd cheered as John brought her to safety. Marcus and the others clapped. The fire trucks arrived soon after and put out the fire. Later, at the hospital, John stayed by the woman's side. Her name was Mrs. Green. She thanked John with tears in her eyes. "You saved my life," she said softly. John felt something deep inside. In that moment, he knew his job was more than rules and order. It was about caring for people. After the fire, the town came together to help Mrs. Green. Volunteers cleaned her home and brought food and clothes. The community center organized a fundraiser to support her. John and Miles watched as the town worked side by side, showing kindness and strength. One evening, Miles asked John, "Do you remember when we first met?" John laughed softly. "Yes. I was afraid and angry." Miles nodded. "Now, look at you. You have changed a lot." John smiled, "I have you to thank for that." Miles looked around at the busy community center, filled with laughter and hope. "This is the true test of who we are," Miles said. "Not just words, but actions." John agreed. "And I want to keep passing that test." But change was not always easy. Some old fears and doubts still came to John's mind. He sometimes wondered if he was strong enough to keep going. One night, John sat alone, thinking about everything he had learned. He thought about the people he had judged and the ones who had shown him kindness. John realized that being strong did not mean never feeling afraid. It meant facing fear and choosing kindness anyway. The next day, John went to the community center and told Miles about his thoughts. Miles smiled, "That is real strength, John. I am proud of you." Together, they planned new activities to bring the town closer. They wanted everyone to feel safe and respected. As the sun set, John looked at the town from the park bench. He saw children playing, neighbors talking, and friends helping each other. John felt hope and peace. He knew that the lesson he had learned from Miles was more than a lesson about fear or hate. It was a lesson about humanity. Would you like me to write the final part, Part 7? How is the story connecting with you? Here's Part 6 for you: simple, emotional, and engaging. Part 6, the true test. Spring had come to the town, filling the streets with light and fresh energy. Flowers bloomed in gardens, and birds sang songs that made the morning feel warm and new. For John and Miles, it was a season of hope and hard work. John's daily patrols had changed. He greeted people with a smile, listened more, and tried to understand before judging. Miles kept running the community center, where young people gathered to paint murals, play sports, and learn about respect and teamwork. One bright morning, a call came in about a fire at an old building near the edge of town. Though the fire was small, it was dangerous because homes were close by. John hurried to the scene. Neighbors were outside, worried and afraid. The fire trucks had not arrived yet. John knew he needed to act fast. As he looked around, John saw Marcus and some other teenagers helping by moving objects away from the fire and alerting neighbors. John felt proud. "Marcus! Keep everyone safe!" John shouted. Marcus smiled, "We're doing our best, sir." Suddenly, the fire grew bigger, and the roof began to collapse. John noticed a woman trapped inside. Without thinking, John ran into the smoky building, calling out, "Where are you?" A weak voice answered, "Help me, please." John found Mrs. Green coughing in a small room. He gently lifted her and carried her outside. The crowd cheered as John saved her life. Soon after, the fire trucks arrived and put out the fire. At the hospital, John stayed by Mrs. Green's side. She held his hand and said with tears, "Thank you. You saved me." John felt a warmth deep inside. In that moment, he understood his job was about more than rules. It was about caring for people. After the fire, The whole town came together. Volunteers cleaned Mrs. Green's home and brought food and clothes. The community center held a fundraiser to help her. John and Miles watched as neighbors worked side by side, showing kindness and strength. One evening, Miles asked John, "Do you remember when we first met?" John smiled, "Yes. I was angry and afraid." Miles nodded, "Look at you now. You have changed." John laughed softly, "I have you to thank." Miles looked at the lively community center, filled with laughter and hope. "This is the real test," Miles said. "Not just words, but actions." John nodded, "I want to keep passing that test." But change was not easy. Old fears sometimes came back. John wondered if he was strong enough to keep going. One quiet night, John thought about all he had learned. He remembered the people he had judged and those who had shown kindness. He realized true strength wasn't about never feeling afraid. It was about facing fear and choosing kindness anyway. The next day, John shared his thoughts with Miles. Miles smiled, "That's real strength, John. I'm proud of you." Together, they planned new activities to bring the town closer. They wanted everyone to feel safe and respected. As the sun set, John sat on a park bench watching children play and neighbors talk. He felt peace and hope. He knew the lesson Miles had taught him was about more than fear or hate. It was a lesson about being human. The town had changed, and so had John. The man who once saw the world through fear and doubt now saw it with hope and kindness. But the true test of change is not in quiet moments, it is in times of challenge. One warm afternoon, the police station received a call. There was a large crowd gathering near the market square. People were upset because a misunderstanding had grown between some shop owners and a group of teenagers. John and Miles arrived quickly. When they reached the market, the crowd was loud, and faces showed anger and fear. John saw Marcus standing quietly with his friends, trying to calm the tension. John stepped forward and raised his hands. "Everyone, please listen," he said calmly. "Let's talk and understand each other." Miles joined him. "We all want the same thing, a safe and happy town. Let's work together." Slowly, the crowd began to quiet down. John asked the shop owners and teenagers to share their thoughts. One shop owner spoke first. "I feel like these kids do not respect our work. Sometimes, they scare customers." Marcus then spoke up. "We don't want to cause trouble. We want to help and be part of the town." John looked around. He saw that the fear and anger were not because people were bad, but because they did not understand each other. John said, "We need to remember that trust is built with time and kindness." The meeting lasted long into the evening. By the end, the crowd had agreed to work together. The shop owners promised to welcome the youth, and the teenagers promised to respect the market. Miles smiled and said, "This is the power of community." Later that night, John walked home thinking about the day. He realized how far he had come from suspicion and judgment to listening and understanding. The next morning, John went to the community center. He saw Marcus and other young people preparing for a new project, a mural that showed the town's history and hopes. John joined them. As he painted, he felt a connection to the town he had once doubted. Miles stood nearby and said, "You have changed more than you know." John looked at the mural. It showed people of different colors, ages, and backgrounds holding hands. Above them were the words, "Together, we are stronger." John felt tears in his eyes. "Thank you for helping me see this." Miles smiled, "We all need help sometimes." Weeks later, the town held a festival to celebrate the new spirit of unity. Music filled the streets, children played games, and neighbors shared food. John stood with Miles, watching the joy around them. He knew this was not the end of the journey, but a new beginning. He thought about his father, about his sister Anna, about the townspeople who had taught him to be better. John promised himself to keep learning, to keep listening, and to keep building bridges. Because true strength, he had learned, was not in power or fear, but in kindness, respect, and hope. And in that small town, under the bright sky, a new story was beginning, one of trust, friendship, and a better tomorrow.